Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. Our own Nick D'Virgilio is well known for the excellent drum videos he does for YouTube and Facebook demonstrating products for us here at Sweetwater. He's also our staff drummer in Sweetwater Studios, and in addition to that, he's a member of Big Big Train, a popular prog band out of the UK. Now, Big Big Train has been having a lot of success lately. Their last album, Folklore, was voted Best Album of the Year. They've won Best Band of the Year. Nick's been named Best Drummer of the Year. And recently, their new album, Grimspound, achieved a listing of #1 on the UK National Rock Charts. We had a chance to sit down with Nick D'Virgilio and Mark Hornsby, the Director of Studio Operations at Sweetwater Studios, to talk about how they recorded the drums and vocals here at Sweetwater, the challenges of working on a transatlantic album production, and lots more. Check this out. I'm joined today by Mark Hornsby from Sweetwater Studios and Nick D'Virgilio, who you all know as our drum demonstrator here in the videos, content creator, but also the studio drummer at Sweetwater Studios. So what we're talking about is Nick is part of a band called Big Big Train out of the UK, and an organization called the Classic Rock Society presents awards every year. Yep. And Big Big Train actually picked up 4 awards for the album Folklore, including Best Drummer. Very cool.
It is very cool, yeah.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So that album also did very well at the Prog Rock Awards last year. So it's been getting some good...
It's been a cool thing for the band. The band's really picking up a lot of steam, even though we don't play live very much, which is a whole other, conversation in itself. But the way the band's putting out music and the way the music is touching the people is making these things happen, which is a really, really fun and exciting aspect.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the connection here is, in addition to, of course, you playing on the album, is that Mark, you and Nick recorded the drums and Nick's vocals here at Sweetwater Studios.
Yep.
Tell us how that works when the band is working in the UK and you're here in Fort Wayne in the studios. How does that whole process work?
Well, it starts with you.
Luckily for me, I've been with the band for a while. So we kind of know each other and how the guys write the songs. And they have a feel of what I'm going to do on the songs already. Mm-hmm. So it would be different if I was a complete stranger to the band and they were just sending me the tracks out of the blue and I had to kind of go back and forth with them quite a bit. But they send me the tracks in knowing that what I'm going to send back will be close to what they're going to want for the songs.
Okay.
If we have to make changes, we do, but it's going to be in the ballpark already. So that helps a lot to speed up the process.
Right.
And we had done all of the recording for the previous records in the UK. But since I'm here now working, I'm not touring as much as I used to. This is my main job now. This is where I record. So they sent the tracks over and we, lots of very cool songs to do, and we set up shop in Studio A and went for it. And it was a really fun process. We got to really kind of go to town as far as miking up the drums and make them sound as good as we possibly can, because we get great sounds at the studios here.
Sure.
And they loved what we did, and we've already made a second record.
Wow.
Yeah, 2. So
wow, great.
Things are progressing forward in that arena as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So that album is Grimspound, correct?
That's the most recent one, yeah. It's out now. Yeah.
Right. So when you receive those tracks, are you getting demo drum parts? Is there a drum machine, just a click, or how do you receive them?
Yeah, every which way. Mm-hmm. It depends on who writes the song. Some guys get more into a feel ahead of time. They might put in a demo thing. Some might just have the click freely. They always have some notes, give it this kind of feel, just go to town, stay true to this part here. So they have, again, it depends on the writer.
Right.
But yeah, we get stems. We get a bass stem, a guitar stem. They try to make it simple for Mark so he doesn't have a boatload of tracks to go through when we're starting to record.
Right.
And Rob, the engineer over there, is pretty good about cleaning up the tracks, printing clicks, and making it easy on our end. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Mark, when you approach the drum sounds for a project like this, the tracks were mixed in the UK after the fact. Mm-hmm. So do you provide something where you consider it a finished drum part? Is it something where you're saying this is a great start for you to work from, or how do you approach that aspect of it?
Well, it's not too far off from what we do. Nick plays on drums for a lot of different people that, we send them off into the ether, and some people like the hi-hats, turned up really high in the mix. Some people like a really bright room. Some people like a really warm room. The goal is to turn up the faders and have a great sounding track, right out of the box. And, Studio A, nice Neve front end, all Shelford series modules. On this particular album, we used the DW kit. It's a cherry gumwood with a nice 23-inch kick drum. And it's a combination of things. All the direct mics that are on the kit. Overheads, when I'm sending tracks off to someone else that's going to mix them, I don't compress them, and I try to use microphones that are pretty flat in response.
Okay.
So they're flexible for whoever's using them on the other end. Room mics, we do a couple different arrays of room mics. We use a pair of tube condensers and we use a pair, well, not a pair, but the Royer SF12 stereo microphone.
Right.
So you got stereo ribbon, which is warm. You got 2 cardioid condensers, which are brighter. And then we even put a U87 back in one of the ISO booths and crack the door and compress it really hard just as an effect. So whether it's Rob or anybody else that's turning up the tracks, you got options. The overheads are nice and clean. You turn up the Royer, it's a nice warmer sound on a tom groove, that kind of thing. Or if you want it to rock a little bit harder, you turn up the condensers in the room. It's a great sounding room, so that's an integral part of the sound that we're going for.
Yeah. Right.
If we can give you flexibility with the room mics, the direct hits that's all pretty straightforward.
Right. Right. Now, is that influenced by, I know you receive a lot of tracks to mix as well. I'm sure you see drums come in a wide range of conditions, shall we say.
Oh, yeah.
What do you like to see as a mixer when those tracks are coming in?
I think as a mixer, or if the producer is, the band and they're in a different country, you want to turn up the faders and see something that is musical and technically dots all the I's and crosses all the T's, but it serves the song. We didn't put the same snare drum on every song. Some songs, did one of the songs we even switch drum kits?
Yeah, we used the Ludwig Vistalite on a couple of songs for this particular record.
One of the tracks, they were specific. They said
they wanted a Zeppelin Bonham-y kind of sound.
Yeah, they said, can you do the Bonham thing? So we got out the Vistalite kit.
Nice.
And we went for that sound, which involves room mics and a lot of compression. And you turn up the faders, and it's like, oh, it's that type of vibe.
Yeah.
The long answer to your question is when I turn up the tracks that people send me to mix, I want stuff where everything is clear and I can get clarity out of the direct mics. I want a decent sounding room and a good performance, because when people do performances and comp them together, I'd like that to be done ahead of time. I don't want to receive 6, 7, 8 playlists of drums and now I'm trying to reinvent the drum performance in the mixing process.
Right.
That's not my job. My job is to just make the drums sound good, and he does a great job of that on the back end. After we record everything, I give it back to him, and you do.
I comp all my own drum tracks. I send them everything, just in case they want a different fill here. I mean, we usually do 4 or 5 takes of each thing, and we do this the same with any client that sends us stuff to record on if we're doing it remotely. 4 or 5 takes, depending on the song, and then I'll comp my track, making the best performance I think, that would fit the song. But then you also give them the extra stuff in case they want to find an extra fill or maybe a little bit different feel here, there, that kind of stuff. So they have options on that end of it as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So Mark, give us a rundown on the mics that you're using on the drums for the Folklore album.
So on the kick drum, I'm using 2 microphones. On the inside of the kick, the beater microphone, I'm using a Shure Beta 52. And then on the outside, I'm using a Royer 121 on this particular project, Folklore. And lately, we've switched to the Royer 122. Because when you engage the pad and the high pass on that, it plays a lot better with the kick drum because, ribbons have so much low end.
Right.
And the pad on the 122 is actually, when you engage it, it's a dB or 2 lower than the output of a 121. So in front of a kick drum, that definitely keeps you further away from possible distortion. On the snare drum top, I use a Telefunken M80 short body. There's really no difference between the short body and the long body M80. It's just shorter and it's easier to get in between the cracks on drums.
Right.
On the bottom of the snare, I use a Telefunken M81. The difference between a Telefunken M80 and an M81 is the M80 has that nice lift on the top end, which is great for the crack of a snare drum. And the 81 is actually flat, and it's down there where those snare wires are. And we don't need a whole lot of lift down there. That doesn't need to be brighter. That just needs to be smooth. On the hi-hat, we used a Shure KSM 141. Some people gravitate towards brighter small diaphragm condensers. I like a flatter frequency response. Nick uses a variety of cymbals. Sometimes they're really dark, sometimes they're really bright. He's always changing them. That's a safety to have a smooth sounding small diaphragm condenser because you can always make it brighter in the mix. The hi-hat if you want to.
Sure.
On the toms, classic Sennheiser MD421s, and sometimes the Telefunken M81s. Dynamic mics sound great on toms, especially the DW kit that we're recording. It's a big, warm, punchy, cherry gumwood drum kit. That's a nice marriage. Sometimes we'll do condensers, but most of the time we're sticking with dynamics on the toms. depending on the session, we use a couple different overhead mic configurations. On this album, we were using the Audio-Technica 5045s. You almost don't have to touch an EQ at all. They sound crystal clear, they have flat frequency response, they sound great on the toms, on the cymbals, none of that low-end mud, that, that mid-range that you're often looking to dial out on a drum kit. In the room, there's the Royer SF12, XY configuration, obviously, and compressing that a little bit with a pair of Universal Audio 1176s. And then to the left and right, measured the same distance from the kick drum, are Mojave MA200s, cardioid condensers. And the kick drum thing, that's all about phase. So if I've got one set or one microphone, the SF12, in the middle of the room, if I'm going to use an alternate pair of overheads, I want to make sure all the capsules are the same distance from the kick drum. That seems to be a good spot. And typically, when you look at when you turn up the faders and you look at the waveforms, they're pretty dead on. That way, if you want to use both sets of room mics, you've got that option. And then lastly, we take a U87 and we put it on Omni, stick it back in the ISO room that has a sliding glass door. We crack it about a foot and then just compress it within an inch of its life. So if you turn that up, it really makes the drums, pump and breathe, which is great for a rock track.
So you also tracked Nick's vocals here. How did you approach that?
That goes back and forth. Sometimes it's the two of us, and sometimes it's him by himself.
Yeah, it just depends. I'm singing background vocals most of the time for Big Big Train. David Longdon, who won Best Vocalist for the Classic Rock Society as well this year, which is really cool for him. So sometimes, Mark doesn't need to be there producing a background part a lot of times. I'm just doing, oohs and ahs, maybe a lead line here or there. So I can record that on my own just as easily. You don't necessarily need the full studio for that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you using I assume a large diaphragm condenser? Do you have a particular chain that you record through, or do you try to give them as raw of a vocal as possible so they can process it later?
Well, I don't know what you do, but I like a 251 on Nick's vocal, a Telefunken 251.
So do I, yeah. It's a great
on background vocals, that works really well because of that top end lift. If it's more of a solo part, U47's a go-to, or on a rockin', more aggressive vocal sound, the SM7 pairs up very well with him.
Yeah.
And that's usually Shelford module going into a Retro 176.
Okay.
And we hit it pretty hard. That's a good thing about that compressor is you can bury the needle on it and get that effect of a nice polished vocal that, sits nicely in the mix, but it doesn't sound like it's been manipulated.
Right. So it's pretty much ready then when they roll the fader up. It's kind of a produced vocal at that point. I mean, it's got the compression on it. It's pretty well set.
Yeah,
Right.
I think so. And same thing on the drum tracks too. Rob is a great engineer and a great mixer, but I noticed listening to Folklore a lot, he, in the mixing process, I guess he appreciated what we did because the sounds I'm hearing, I've heard people mix stuff that I've recorded and it's like, okay, those aren't my drums. Right. There's samples and other stuff in there, and he stays away from that. He goes for the organic, live sound of an acoustic drum set, and it translates over pretty well. So,
right.
Yeah, and we send them. I do samples of the kit afterwards. So in case there's like a tom hit or a fill or a snare hit that maybe wasn't as loud as another one, he can grab something from the samples that we send him in case he needs to fix something along the way inside the mix. So we do give him that those extras in case he needs them. But yeah, he keeps them true.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's pretty interesting. So you're leaving all the mics up and open. You're not closing things down and just taking, for example, the snare mics and doing a sample of that. You're leaving the kit and the room mics and everything and just hitting the snare?
Yeah.
To create, for example, to create.
Oh yeah, when I do this, I turn the snare wires off and I do tom hits. Same with the kick drum, so there's no snare buzz.
Okay.
If he needs it, and just a couple variations from loud to quiet to loud, or back and forth. And and that's it. Just in case he needs something on the back end.
Sure.
On the receiving process of that, he talks about, sending all those takes. A lot of times we do tracks and people give us very specific notes of, hey, I want this. But one of us will probably go, hey, let's do this and give it to them too. And if they like it, great.
Right.
So you got all those takes and you're mixing all that. Samples are great, and the plugins these days are amazing. But to have the snare hit or the tom hits when you're trying to comp together a really cool fill or do something creatively on the back end, and it's like, the crossfade won't work. If you can drop the actual sound of that kit
Oh, yeah.
on that day into the mix, it's far more believable, and you can't tell that the surgery was done if you have those actual samples.
Right. Nice. One of the things I think is awesome, Nick, is, as you mentioned, you're full-time here at Sweetwater, but you did this album. You do some shows with Big Train.
Yeah.
You have your band, The Fringe. You guys did a album and you did a rock cruise,
I was on the prog rock cruise recently, yeah.
And we've seen you do gigs with Tears for Fears and Spock's Beard and some different other artists that you work with. How do you balance that? Because a lot of us have day jobs, and having time and inspiration and energy to work on music after that day job, can be a challenge.
It's definitely a challenge.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
It's definitely a challenge. I come from a pro musician background. I was a touring, working musician for all of these years. So it is different being in a sort of corporate work environment, although this is one of the coolest corporate work environments you can have as a musician.
Right.
Let's be honest, it really is. And thankfully, the higher-ups here allow me to still dabble in these other projects and still have my job here. So I'm totally blessed to have that ability. I'm not out there touring as much as I used to be. So and it's actually kind of a good thing, because I'm focused on Big Train. And the Fringe, was built here. It was a band that came from Sweetwater and was grown out of this place. But again, we're not doing a ton of stuff outside of here as far as gigs are concerned. So I can focus on those things, and I'm not touring 8 months out of the year and stuff. So it allows for both things to happen. But it's definitely a challenge, because I'm always pulled to want to go play.
Right.
I don't think that'll ever leave me.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I want to be on stage.
Part of being
all
a
the time.
musician, right?
Totally. So, but there's life and reality too, and I got family and pay the bills and all those kinds of normal things as well. And Sweetwater definitely gives me that ability.
Right.
And so it's cool.
Amazing.
And it helps, recording Big Train here at Sweetwater gives Big Train some love to the outside world that may not know the band, which is great publicity, because, we play a certain kind of music. And prog rock suffers from not being the most popular style of music in the world.
Not the most mainstream.
Not the most mainstream. So it helps people get turned on to Big Train, which is a great thing as well. So, it's everybody gets some love all the way around.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's awesome. I think, like I say, inspiring to those of us who have day jobs and want to keep making music and
you bet.
keep doing things.
From a workflow point of view, to pat him on the back a little bit, progressive rock is, a second language to him, between Spock's and Fringe and Big Train, Tears for Fears, Genesis, all that stuff. When we're working on something like Big Train, it goes pretty quick. I mean, we're not in there for a long period of time discussing and philosophizing. He's listened to the demo ahead of time, and we do a couple takes and we're on to the next thing. So I could be wrong, but I think that aids in the ability for you to multitask that much.
Sure.
We're not, we can do drums on an entire record in a couple hours.
Wow.
If it's stuff that he's familiar with, he's already listened to it, and we've also worked together for a long time, and we have a system of telling people when to, telling each other when to shut up. So,
but that's important, is if you have a workflow that you've developed that can allow you to get work done, because that's one of the big limitations that artists face, is nobody has enough time.
Right.
And certainly if you're in a commercial studio and you're working that way, you want to optimize that flow.
You bet.
So having that really makes it much more efficient, allows you to actually create music as opposed to getting set up to make music.
Yeah, the goal is to make the technology transparent, that's for sure. I like Jeff Daking's quote, get home early. That's kind of our thing. We don't ever want to sacrifice quality, but we know how long it should take each other to do our job. And if one of us starts slacking on it, we'll call each other on it and say, oh, come on, let's pick this up. We've been working on this for too long. Let's get on the next tune. And he also knows when he's playing the stuff and doing the takes, since he's going to comp it, he's got a running tally in his head of, I played a good fill on that, and I'll grab that from there. And okay, we're done. Let's move to the next thing. So it's the goal is to get in and get out quickly.
Right.
I think you mentioned, bands and artists. Sometimes I think creativity is great, but in the studio, especially when people are watching the clock, I think sometimes it's detrimental to go way too far down the rabbit hole in terms of, what if we tried this option? And what if we tried that snare? And what if we tried, let's rework the whole bridge, even though we've rehearsed it. There's time and place for that, but I think it also can weaken an inspired performance by micromanaging everything. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah.
Option anxiety rears its ugly head, and you get
Right.
lost
Sometimes,
at that
yeah.
point. So that's where a producer comes in to kind of help maintain the session flow and things. So very cool. Lots of great stuff there. Nick, congratulations, Big Train, best UK band,
Yeah.
Folklore, best album,
Yeah.
best male vocal, best drums for you. So congratulations on that. Very cool, and all your
Thank you very
success.
much. Appreciate
And it's so awesome having you guys here as a resource for drums and for all the other recording tasks that go on here with artists and with production. So very cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch.
Appreciate it. And thank you for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute. I'm Mitch Gallagher.